Welcome,
Uh,
church family, to our Wednesday night service here at the Oakland Center for Spiritual Living. Um, we call it an oasis. It's the Wednesday between the Sundays where it's always been, and we always come back to it. It's a place where we can be together as a community to spiritually refresh one another between Sundays. Our Reverend Jeff introduced our Wednesday night services in the satsang style with the intention that they be informal, intimate, and rich. Our annual theme tonight is Timeless Wisdom Evolutionary Vision. Not only tonight, but every day this year. Timeless Wisdom Evolutionary Vision. It's a new month, y'all. It is a new month, so we have a new theme. Not only are we celebrating Pride Month as a community, but the theme for the month is The Soul's Call. So it's the Wednesday um, before Sunday of a new month. So we're going to hear some ideas on that subject, and then on Sunday, I think it's Reverend Sunny's speaking again. She'll be also introducing us to the monthly theme. If you're here joining us for the first time, we welcome you. We're glad you're here. I'll have some information in the announcements how you can stay better connected with us. And the Zoom team, the fabulous Zoom team working behind the scenes, will have you muted, both your camera and your microphone during the service part to improve the quality of the transmission. But more than anything, we want to make you feel welcome and enjoy our time together as we start our Wednesday night service tonight. Tonight we have a wonderful speaker. He's a chaplain and one of our practitioners. He was just here last month and he's kicking off Pride Month with us, and that's Doug Myers. He has a topic called Pushed by Pain. And tonight he's going to spend most of our time together until speaking on the topic. He has a lot to send to us. If we can, maybe towards the end, we'll get a little bit of time to have questions and answers. But tonight, Doug is going to focus on his talk during our time together. So at this time, I welcome you, Doug, forward and ask if you can open us up in prayer.
It's my pleasure. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for coming. So I just invite you to take a deep breath in. And knowing that is the breath of God breathing as you. That there is only one life, one love, one heart, one mind. And this is God, that is everywhere present, that expresses itself into eternality, that has no beginning nor no end. It just simply is in all of its beauty and all of its magnificence and all of its glory. That divine presence that is within each one of us, that is within this entire planet that we call Earth. In the sky, in the stars, in the sun, in the ocean, in the rivers, in the trout, everywhere present is an expression of spirit in form. And I absolutely know that that divine essence that spirit is the center of who and what I am. And as I know this to be the truth of who I am, I know that this is the truth of each one of us here present, that each of us is the divine expression of God, that we are the beloved of the beloved. And so I bless this Wednesday oasis, a place to come to replenish our soul, to replenish our thought processes, to reestablish that connection to spirit. in community, individually. And I know that this many-colored rainbow that represents the LGBTQ community is in itself an expression of spirit. For red is life, the life of spirit as each one of us. And the orange that represents healing. For we know that that presence of spirit is the eternal healing presence that graces our body temples. And the yellow that is light, that light that is within each one of us at the very center of our being, that divine spark. And the green that is nature, that place where we go to communicate with spirit in its most beautiful nature, in its most beautiful form, whether it be in the mountains amongst the trees, at the ocean side, as the waves crash, as we smell the fragrance of a flower. And the blue is for peace, that place that allows us to be compassionate and to be empathetic, to experience peace of mind, to know that that is a gift of spirit for each one of us. And lastly, the purple, which represents spirit. And for all of this and the more, I am greatly thankful. I am honored to be with you here tonight as we kick off the recognition of Pride Month at the Oakland Center for Spiritual Living. And please join me in saying, and so it is. Okay, so I guess I'm gonna kick us off. Let me just explain a little bit about my background that I selected tonight. So you can see the 6 colors of the rainbow that I spoke to in our evocation this evening. Those were the designs from the flag from 1978 that is still commonly used. There were 2 other colors that were pulled out early on. One was hot pink, and the other was, I believe, indigo. The indigo, or turquoise, I think it was actually turquoise. Turquoise was for magic, and the hot pink was for sex. And so they decided to pull those 2 out. So currently we have these 6. In 2018, I believe, is when Daniel Quasar, who's an artist up in Oregon, decided to create the triangles that are now coming into the rainbow flag. And he wanted to represent some of the communities that he felt were marginalized by the greater LGBTQ plus community. So the black and the brown chevrons, if you will, represent black and brown people of color. And the baby blue and the pink and the white are the colors of the trans flag. So that's what that flag represents. So as Paul mentioned, push by pain was the topic that I had tonight to kind of incorporate with our acknowledgement and celebration of Gay Pride. So so here we go. So one of the most memorable quotes of Reverend Dr. Michael Beckwith, who, as probably many of you know, is the founder and the spiritual director of the Agape International Spiritual Center, is, quote, "We are pushed by pain until we are pulled by vision," close quote. So we are pushed by pain until we are pulled by vision. So in celebration of Gay Pride Month, I thought I'd try to take a look at how the pain experienced in the LGBTQ plus community has allowed for a greater vision to reveal itself. June is the LGBTQ plus Pride Month. And if you don't know what the acronym stands for, it's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transsexual. The Q can be queer and or questioning, and then the plus, there are other letters. I is for intersex, A is for asexual, P is for pansexual. So it keeps getting longer and longer. I'm limiting myself to LGBTQ plus tonight. So normally cities all over the world in non-pandemic times would be celebrating their true colors with fabulous marches and parades to celebrate Gay Pride. It's a bold festivity. It's a way for a moment to be unfiltered and to put the LGBTQ plus community on full display with floats and music and drag queens and bikes on bikes and parents with kids and dogs and trans people and politicians who are allies to the gay community and to corporations that support gay rights. There are leather men and there are leather women, lesbians, gay, bisexuals, trans folks, queer and questioning, Black, Indigenous, people of color. They're all present. So it's the youth and the elders as well. And there's flags. There's lots and lots of flags. And of course, you'll see the occasional rainbow. Yet many people forget, or perhaps maybe simply unaware, that Pride inception is directly associated with political unrest and violence against the LGBTQ plus community. And I just want to make a note too that if you have any questions that you want to put into chat, please feel free to do that too, or you can wait till towards the end. So what I wanted to go back to first is the pink triangle. So the pink triangle was used in the 1930s and 1940s by the Nazis in concentration camps. So gay men were forced to wear pink triangles on their breast pockets in the concentration camps that would identify them as a homosexual and would set them apart from any of the other prisoners. If they happened to be gay and Jewish, they would have one triangle in yellow and the other in pink to form the Star of David, but also identified that person as a Jew who was also homosexual. The other thing about the pink triangles at that point, they were larger than the other triangles, and that was so that the guards could more easily identify the homosexual men from a distance. And they were not well treated, certainly by the Gestapo. They were not well treated often by other members that were within the camps who were also incarcerated there. At the end of the war, when the concentration camps were finally liberated, those who were still living were almost uniformly released. However, for many of the prisoners who wore the pink triangle, they were actually reincarcerated into German prisons. So they went from the camps right back into a prison. So then what happened? So there's that heinous Holocaust, right, in the 30s and 40s. By the 1970s, there was this, so keep in mind Stonewall is 1969. So there's this newly active European and North American gay liberation advocacy that's taking place. And they began to reclaim the pink triangle to raise awareness of how it was used in Nazi Germany. And I think it was in the early 70s that there was actually a memoir written by a former concentration camp survivor who was a gay man that really brought it to the public's attention. And so in response, the German gay liberation groups in 73, 74, somewhere in there, called for gay men to wear it as a memorial to past victims and to protest continuing discrimination that was taking place in Germany. And then it popped up in pop culture. So in 1975, many of you may have seen the musical, The Rocky Horror Picture Show. So in the Rocky Horror Picture Show, there's a sequence where Dr. Frankenfurter, who's the bisexual transvestite, he is wearing a pink triangle badge on his surgical gown with his matching pink Playtex rubber gloves when Rocky is birthed, basically. And then in the 1980s, it took a much more militant tone. The AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, which is more commonly known as ACT UP, was formed by some gay activists in New York City to draw attention to HIV/AIDS and the disease's disproportionate impact on gay and bisexual men. And what they chose to do was, in the camps, the triangle went from down to a point. So what ACT UP did was to flip it so that the upward point of the pink triangle was pointing upwards, and it was a specific reversal of the usage by the Nazis. And it was basically on a black background, and then ACT UP's logo was silence equals death. So Pride is an act of resistance against those same forces that we're still dealing with, unfortunately, today. And so what I wanted to look at initially was, how do we harness that pain that and allow that which allows a greater vision to reveal itself. So again, the quote is, "We are pushed by pain until we are pulled by vision." So pain pushes until the vision pulls. And I think coming into contact with our emotions ultimately allows us to really see more clearly the pain that we may be experiencing about whatever that is, whatever that emotion is trying to tell us. And this idea that the pain is pushes until this vision is the idea that pain can actually be the first step and the catalyst towards moving towards a greater vision for ourselves, and whether that's individually or collectively. So what I believe is that the pain that I may be experiencing in my sadness is really reflecting this vision of a beloved global community. And I know that we can create this together. In my heart of hearts, I know that this is possible. And so the pain that I feel around all of the racial injustice that has reared its ugly head over this past year, that we're coming to a deeper reckoning, I think, within this moment, and at a mass scale. And it's revealing a vision for a world that actually normalized equality, that has normalized diversity, that has normalized the unique expression that embraces the values and the inclusivity and the diversity of each one of us, and has come to a place where all of the diverse and beautiful expressions of this being human can be celebrated, can be utilized, can really become part of all of our lives. That is my vision for our world, and that's what I'm going to hold on to. Now, keep in mind that there are many, many, many people in the LGBTQ plus community that have experienced or experience racism within the greater community. There have been times where, where Black and brown people, Asians and Pacific Islanders, trans men, trans women, lesbians, bisexuals have been deliberately left out of conversations from organizations and safe spaces. And that's because initially they were exclusively organized by gay white men. So that culture of the white patriarchy was very much at play within the LGBTQ community. In fact, in San Francisco, there's been a lot of certainly since the 1980s, and with the AIDS epidemic, a lot of bars and neighborhoods have certainly shifted, but there were separate clubs, and I'm going to use gay men specifically. So in the Castro, for example, there was a club, a bar that was really for Black men and white men who liked Black men. And then on Polk Street, there was a bar that was really for Asian and Pacific Islanders, and for men who liked Asian and Pacific Islanders. In the Mission, same thing for the Latinx community. So there were all these kind of like divisions within the bar system, and the same was true for the women, because a lot of women weren't very welcome, certainly in the 1980s, into bars. One of the things that bars, and this actually happened, I went to a dance bar with a friend of mine, and she was wearing open-toed heels, because it was sort of the height of disco, and they wouldn't let her in because she had open-toed shoes on, and they claimed that someone could step on her toes, and they didn't want to be liable. So there was all sorts of like weird stuff that was going on within the community. So anyway, with that said, I still choose to hold on to a vision that works for everyone, envisioning all people, all beings, and all life as expressions of God. And I'm going to choose I pulled out some pieces from A World That Works for Everyone from our teaching. One is that collectively, we're called to a higher state of consciousness and action. Two, that humanity is awakening to its spiritual magnificence. Third, we are one global family, and our family respects and honors the interconnectedness of all life. Personal responsibility joins with social conscience. I think we've seen that happening during this past year. That each person has enough food, a home, and a sense of belonging. That resources are valued and cared for and grown, so that there's food for everyone. That forgiveness is the norm. And that there's a renewed emphasis on beauty, nature, and love. And in that is a world that works for everyone and for all of creation. I truly truly believe that this is possible. And I pray to God every day that I live to see it in my lifetime. And so this vision is also like to me anyway, is like a deep spiritual tool. And I find that it helps me stay grounded in these challenging times. Because I think without that vision, we can kind of just sort of get stuck like in the pain. But the pain isn't there, I don't think, just for us to feel, to just like feel pain or to feel suffering or to experience suffering. Reverend Michael says that pain is there so that we can begin to come in contact with that vision, so that the vision can then take the reins and begin to pull us to a better future and to a better life, a better way of being together, of being with each other, and of being these human beings that maybe can do some good for ourselves and with each other in the world. So that's how that pain can be pulled by the vision. If we all of a sudden, Dorothy from the Wizard of Oz just popped into my head when the witch on her broomstick writes "Surrender, Dorothy." I think it's that act of surrendering. If we surrender to the pain and allow the vision to pull us, we're able to move forward. So in the 1970s, actually it was in 1970 proper. So the Stonewall riot was in 1969 in New York City. The following year, on the anniversary of that, was the very first Pride event. And it was called the Christopher Street Liberation Day March. And Christopher Street is in Greenwich Village, and it's kind of like the equivalent of the Castro in San Francisco. So it's like a predominantly gay area. But keep in mind, this is in 1972, right? So, but that was the reason that it was organized, was to commemorate what had happened the year prior. And now I think I know why there's the connection with Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, because when Stonewall happened, it was also either the night after that Judy Garland had passed away. And certainly within the gay community among men, Judy Garland is like this icon. So anyway, I don't know, Judy's popping up. Maybe she's visiting us tonight. I'm not sure. Anyway, so let me just be clear. So this parade that, as we know today, which is, really, it's loud and it's bright and it's fun. In 1970, for those folks walking down Christopher Street, there was no music. There was no dancing. There were no streamers. There was no glitter. It was truly a legitimate risk to walk out and march that night. And yet it was a sign of resistance. And so the LGBTQ Pride Parade has evolved over the decades. And it started out, in essence, as a riot, right? So today, Pride marches around the nation are still rooted in really serious activism, even if they may seem on the surface level as like this great party, or perhaps even too commercial. So, it's trans rights, marriage equality, embracing people of color. There's just any number of people being able to serve in the military in the U.S. So there's all sorts of stuff that sort of fuels the gay pride parades. So I have hope. I have hope that there will be cracks in each one of our hearts, but especially those hearts who may not have cracked open quite yet. To be really a part of the change, to really seek more equity and love in the world, so that the vision that I I know is coming through all of us, and I'm excited for it. And I know that so many of the things that we're doing to help spiritually ground ourselves during this time can be really filled with like a tremendous opportunity to create a world that we'd really like to see. And I think that's what drew a lot of us here to the Oakland Center for Spiritual Living. It's to create a world that truly works for everyone. Um, and to meet the unique challenges of this time, but to do so with honesty, and recognizing that everything going on to make contact with that pain that may still be underneath that, but then allowing that to pull us into a greater vision for our own lives, for our community's life, and ultimately for the world itself. That's my hope. And so again, like Pride Month is about activism. It's about remembering the roots of pain that potentially pushed the vision of equality for the LGBTQ plus community. And I just want to highlight, there are, I'm sure, many, many more that I'm unaware of, but I just wanted to highlight just a few incidents that happened. So way back in 1959, at Cooper's Donuts, which was an all-night coffee shop in Los Angeles. It was often frequented in the early wee hours of the morning by drag queens and hustlers. And they ended up fighting back against the police because they kept going in and policing for sexual perversion. And so they would demand to see their driver's licenses. And if their gender didn't, so if they were presenting as a woman and they, on their driver's license, it said that they were male, then they could be, they would be arrested. And so it ended up that there was, in essence, a riot at this donut shop, and the cops were being pelted with donuts. So that was one of the very first riots that happened. Then in 1966, here in San Francisco, was the Compton's cafeteria riot. Again, this was an all-night diner that was in the Tenderloin. It was frequented by prostitutes and transsexual prostitutes and hustlers. And the police, like in LA, would also come in to harass the folks that were in there. And one night, one of the trans women threw her coffee in the face of a cop, and that created this riot. And they started breaking windows, and it ended up spilling out into the street. And there was another riot the following evening. Also in '66, but in New York City, there was what was called the Sip-In at Julius. Julius was a bar. And in New York, if a bar served someone who was openly homosexual or sexual deviant, that bar or that restaurant could be shut down for disorderly conduct. And so what happened was there were 4 men who were well-dressed. They sat down at the bar. They let the bartender know that they were 4 homosexuals and they all wanted cocktails. They were refused service, and that incident led ultimately to a court case that determined that the New York State Liquor Authority could not deny service to gay men or gay people. Then in 1969, there was the Stonewall Inn riot, which is still kind of the catalyst, if you will, of the gay rights movement. Then again in San Francisco in 1979, you may remember the White Night riots. So this happened after Dan White received a fairly lenient sentence for the murder of Harvey Milk and Mayor Moscone. And what ended up happening that night was that there was this protest, and it escalated at City Hall into a full-on riot. There were demonstrations. They were fighting back against the officers to contain them. There were a lot of cars that PD cars, police department vehicles that were burned. So that was another event. In 1993 was the first Dyke March in Washington, D.C. And it was a coalition rather, of advocates from the Lesbian Avengers, from ACT UP, from Puss in Boots, and they stormed Washington, D.C. to protest anti-LGBTQ legislation. And I think it was, over 20,000 lesbians descended in Washington, D.C. And then lastly, ACT UP. So ACT UP, one of the co-founders of it was Larry Kramer, and it was an HIV/AIDS activist group, and they were very much in your face, doing demonstrations and die-ins, and they were trying to bring focus to the AIDS epidemic when the disease was largely being ignored by President Reagan and the public health officials. And I think that in 91 there were 100 people arrested maybe for civil disobedience, and they changed themselves to the gates of the White House. And approximately 750 Americans have died from complications due to HIV/AIDS. So those are some of the pain that was experienced within the LGBTQ plus community that perhaps helped push it to a vision of equality. And I guess my takeaway for this evening is that my ask is that we remember how much it took to get where we are today, because pride is ultimately about human rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you very much for reminding me of some of the things I actually had witnessed. So at 63 years old, there was quite a lot of activity. Do you want to take a minute and talk about gay marriage? How that was I felt a turning point to a sense of mainstream. All that pain birthed all of the work that all of the freedoms that I enjoy at this age manifested ultimately in the ability for gay marriage to be recognized. And I think there was a lot of pain all the way along. I was there. I actually was living in San Francisco working at the phone company. I was 20. Let me do a quick math. For 1979, for the White Night and the murders and everything, I was 21 years old. And I lived up in Twin Peaks and had to pass by City Hall to get downtown to New Montgomery Street to go to work. And witnessed it all and was there for the riots. I remember when I was at the parade when Harvey Milk rode in the parade, I think a year before, in a car, open car. Those were revolutionary celebrations, the gay parades in San Francisco. And the fact that we had a mayor at the time that was not only tolerant, but gay friendly, you might say, or I'll use that term because I'm pre-LGBTQI, gay men, everything back in the day. Um, it was a very painful event with the Moscone and Milk murders, but that kind of brought us together too. So all of these things that you talked about that were so painful, it also makes us stronger. And I'm not just talking in the realm of the pride celebrations, but in any event in life that's painful. If we monitor it properly and know our source, and I think it makes us, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah, I had in the 1980s, actually, I had the opportunity to attend two gay marriages. And keep in mind, back then they were not legal. Um, there was one that was held in the evening. It was a small group of us, and it was held at the in Golden Gate Park at I'm not sure what you call it, the House of Flowers, the
The
big,
botanical gardens and
yeah, the big glass building. It was inside of that, and it was a Buddhist ceremony. Um,
Conservatory.
Thank you.
You're
The
welcome.
conservatory, yes. And then I attended another one that was a Jewish wedding that had, it was kind of hilarious. It had a Western theme with a rabbi, and the women were dressed like they like saloon gals, basically. And after the wedding ceremony, they had like this big kind of barbecue type dinner. Um, so that was kind of early on, and I can remember my former partner. He said, he said to me, "So, do you want to get married?" And I was like, "Nah, I don't think I want to do that." It just
exactly.
and so I was like, that was not a path that I wanted to go down. What I think is fortunate, certainly for Oakland Center for Spiritual Living, is that we actually had two people who were in the forefront of marriage equality that attended Oakland CSL, and that was Molly McKay and her ex-wife Davina Kotulski, and they were um,
Pioneers and advocates.
yes, absolutely. That's absolutely what they were. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And a lot of that came right out of the center. And
yes.
and Davina actually wrote a book about pre, you know, how we will move towards gay marriage. And Molly's an attorney,
Hmm.
and Molly's a personal friend of mine. For those that were in the pre-show preparation, I talked about one of my kids. I helped raise Molly and Randy's daughter. She was one of my kids, Mackenzie, before they moved up to Portland. Um, so, but Molly, I mean, she was out in the streets, and she filed legal briefs and took things. She was active with the gay marriage movement all the way right up to the and including the Supreme Court.
Hmm.
There's still YouTube videos out there about her, but they were they sat in the same chairs that we sit in when we're in the center. And
Yeah,
Reverend
and
Joan at the time really promoted it and supported it in our community. So you can say we had a little bit of piece of gay marriage history now that I think about it.
I
yeah,
don't know about the States because I was in Canada at the time. But prior to gay marriage was the right for gay immigration, and the ability to bring in a partner. And the two women who did the fight in Canada, who brought that forth, were ex nuns,
huh,
and
Wow.
um, and one of them was Canadian, the other one was U.S., and they took that to the Supreme Court and won it. And then there wasn't a lot. There was, I mean, gay marriage was legal in Canada 10 years maybe before it was here. So when I first came down here and I watched that fight going on, I just knew it was going to happen because I knew that it was a tide that could not be turned back, even if people wanted it to. Now, what we've seen, of course, is that doesn't mean it can never be turned back. We're seeing that with Roe versus Wade and a few other things. So it's nothing we can take for granted. But um, yeah, so it isn't something we can just take for granted, which is, yeah, that's all.
One, yeah, and one of the things that Molly used to always do when they were not well, demonstrating, for lack of a word, but sort of publicly speaking, was she always was in a wedding gown.
Yes, true. And it's like water. It seeked its least resistance, the whole gay marriage movement, because Governor Newsom was mayor of San Francisco. When he was mayor, he legalized it before the federal government base and the state government came in and shut it down. There was, and that's when Molly and Davina got married, by the way, if I recall their story correctly. They rushed over and said, we're going to do it while we can.
Mm-hmm.
My choice with my partner was, I don't know, I'm not so crazy about it. Very much like you, Doug. I had the cold feet, but that we've been together 36 years. So, and I know I only look 38, but it's true. But it meandered on a statewide level and then a national level where civil unions were recognized, and you could set up a domestic partner agreement between same-sex couples that then led to allowance of health care. It was little
right.
teeny tiny drips through the cracks of legality that ultimately became a flood and went to the Supreme Court and then became, but there were mechanisms that Stephen and I used to protect our home and our wealth, because that's what marriage is, you know. And it started, we had the domestic partnership corporation and we had an agreement, and then I could get on his health care. That all those little teeny tiny steps led to ultimately legalized gay marriage. So very
Yeah, because I mean,
fascinating history.
yeah, and then during the AIDS crisis in the 1980s, what happened for gay couples is their partners often were prohibited from being allowed to see them in the hospital because they had this tenet that you had to be a blood relative
Immediate family.
or a
Yes.
spouse.
Yes.
And so they, these men were in the process of making their transition from this horrid disease, and the person that they were in love with was not allowed to be with them.
And what made matters worse was when they had households together and one partner got sick and went to the hospital and passed away. In California, next of kin is or your spouse, and you're
Right.
not a spouse. So families would swoop in and take everything and take claim and win custody of the money and of the furniture and of the possessions of both parties.
Yeah.
It was very difficult. We had to do several things, Stephen and I, legally to protect our assets. I use that word term loosely, but our home and our wealth, because I had family members that were not welcoming of the idea during that time of us being together. So there's been some painful moments, but we found a way. It's all about finding, like water, seeking its least resistance,
Right.
finding a way. Does anybody else have something they want to say or ask or about the history or anything that Doug spoke about? We can take a few minutes doing that, satsang style. Laser. Reverend Jerry.
I just wanted to take a moment, Doug, and you too, Paul, for to thank you for the great historical background of where we've been. And I too hold your vision for, we've come a long way, and there's still a long way to go. But I really hold that vision because there have been so many changes over the years. My very near and dear cousin Bruce, he and I grew up together as little tiny kids, and he's in a beautiful relationship with his partner Burke. But I've been through his ups and downs through the years in the 70s and 80s when he and his former husband lived in the Castro. So I've been exposed to a lot of that energy and have loved every bit of it. And then his partner passed away, and so he was heartbroken for many, many years. But he's in partnership again in a wonderful relationship. So I too hold that vision that world that works for all, especially in this community. And so thank you for bringing the historical aspect back around so we can remember. Appreciate it.
And just knowing that we had a part of that history right out of our center for things getting better, Doug, is amazing. I'm glad you brought that up tonight. I'd forgotten that. And it reminds me that we're rooted in transformation. That's part of our the thing we say every Sunday, our statement. And if you don't think it works, this is an example where it does work.
Mhm.
Let me jump in with it.
Yes,
One
Peggy.
question for both of you, for you, Doug, and Paul, you too. How has the tide changed on the view of gay couples raising children?
Hmm.
Doug, I'll leave that to you. I can add something there if you want.
Yeah.
My cousin, I have both of my cousins are gay. I have three cousins actually, two women and a man. And I'm very pleased that my cousin has found a wonderful mate, and they want to adopt and raise a child. Actually, they want to adopt a set of twins even. So it's just a wonderful. They got such big hearts and all of that. So, but I haven't had a chance to really talk to them at length, but I guess they're having some resistance.
Yeah, I think, certainly it would depend, I think, Peggy, where one lives in this country. I think that's a big factor. If you're living in the San Francisco Bay Area, it's probably a much more accepting place for gay couples or lesbian couples or trans couples to have children. I think that I'm just thinking of a friend of mine, and she and her former partner, so she had a baby, and her mother was like over the moon that they had this baby and that she had a granddaughter. And so I think the dynamic is certainly different from family to family, and especially with the extended family. Mm-hmm. So again, I think my hope is that the fear I think that a lot of people have, hopefully over time will dissipate. There's still people that are like, oh, two gay men cannot adopt a little boy because it's going to be there's going to be pedophilia or something.
Right.
And that would that happen? Absolutely. Is that the norm? Absolutely not. I think most of the couples that have children, it's kind of their vision is really pulling them to be able to have that experience, to have a child in their life. I mean, Joe and I have decided on 3 dogs, so
that's sort of the same thing. Well, it's close.
I think Peggy, to answer your question, and then Constance, I'll come right to you. But I think positive examples of where it has worked over the last 10 and 20 years is showing people that it is possible and doable.
Yeah.
There's also the impact of, if my mother was still alive, and she would support it because she loves me enough, and that love, but that art for her to accept me and Stephen as her children. And if we decided we wanted to have a child, she'd probably say, no, I don't recommend. I've had 4 and I don't recommend it, but that's a side story. But I meant the evidence of it working and the interdependencies of what family is,
Yes.
where they can love no matter what. Sage pretty much says it right in the chat. We always need good foster homes and resource homes. I think the success stories of these children that are being raised, and there's some famous male and female couples that are having children and raising them, and now they're in their teens and nobody thinks twice about it. I think those precedent setting success stories is changing the minds and hearts of the ones that are not in favor of that. I hope that helps. Elton John, Barry Carter. Thank you, Reverend John.
Yeah, that helps. I mean, I know the definition of family is evolving at the same time.
Right.
So thank you both for your
I hope
feedback.
that answers your question a little bit. Yeah.
It does. It does.
Okay, well, what I'm going to bring you up here is something I've been thinking a lot about since I agreed to speak this month. And that is when we're talking about, because I'm supposed to be talking about bisexuality next week. And to me, that just brings up the whole issue of sexuality and what is sexuality. And I think that for me, that's what I have seen is where that's one of the big, and it's interesting, Doug, that the Pink for Passion got taken out of the flag, probably as a, I would guess as a way of trying to be more acceptable. Yeah. Because people don't like to think about sex. They like to do it a lot, but they don't like to talk about it. They don't like to think about it. And so when you get kids involved in that, then it gets even more so. So there are many places where gay couples cannot foster. And I had friends in Canada who adopted from the States, and that was in the, those kids have grown now, so that was in the 80s or the 90s. Sherry had to be the adopting parent, and so Lori wasn't even in the picture until the child got to Canada, in which case then they did an adoption. But in order to deal with the agency in the States, they couldn't do it that way. And I think a lot of it goes back to this whole idea of us being sexual beings. And you know, when I was on vacation, my older sister is very keen on family history and saying that she had traced some of our relatives to Puritan times. And my younger brother and I were talking about, we were thinking, you know, I'm not so sure that's such a great thing. You know, put that as a flag because, you know, the Puritan, you know, and so we've got that thing going in this United States where we've got this whole Puritan ethos that comes through the whole thing. And then we've got this whole Wild West thing that goes on, and you get those two things and it gets totally crazy making. But I think it really, you know, it's one of the reasons that I think that the pride fight in the States has been very different than it has been anywhere else in the world, is because we have even a worse view of sexuality than anywhere else in the world because of that Puritan heritage.
Thank you, Constance, for that. Our time is rapidly evaporating as fast as my hairline has been creeping back over the years. I wake up one morning and it's back there, and that's how I feel right now. This is a whole month that's going on Wednesday nights. We're focusing on all of these things. Also, and Jerry's got it in the chat. Richard Robinson, trailblazer, wrote his book, Holding Another Hand. He was in hospice care. he led hospice care, and during the AIDS crisis when it was so necessary. Much history evolved right out of here, out of Oakland Center. So Doug, I'm going to thank you now for opening up this topic. It's going to be rich all month long. I'm going to run through some announcements real quick so you know what's going on, because we got stuff going on, some exciting stuff. Sunday, June 6th, next Sunday, is Reverend Sunny, and she'll also be talking The Soul's Call and Pushed by Pain as well. Then on Wednesday, actually, it's going to be Constance and I, and we're going to talk about leaning into discomfort. Sage, I want to talk to you about something. If you could text me your phone number, I would like to talk to you. If you could put it in chat before we close, I need to ask you a favor around next Wednesday night. So anyways, if you enjoyed tonight, tell your friends and come next Wednesday night, because we're going to dive into leaning into discomfort. Sunday after service, Zoe and the Compassionate Attention to Loss group are meeting at 12:30. The discussion will be on standing in the shadow of loss. The Zoom link is on the events page. Cast is coming with Carmen West Jefferson, Practitioner Emeritus, 6-week book study. Cast, The Origins of Our Discontent by Isabel Wilkerson. If you're interested in getting involved with this or know people, please spread the word. This study starts next week, so sign up now on the events website. We've been talking about it. It's a 6-week summer series discussion. It's going to be fabulous, and it begins on Monday, June 7th. Also, Reverend Sunny has scheduled another listening circle for Thursday, June 10th. That's a week from this coming Thursday at 12 noon. If you hadn't had an opportunity or want another opportunity to be a part of a listening circle and to be heard, please sign up on the web events page of the website. This is new and interesting, hot off of the press. The home office of Centers for Spiritual Living is proud to offer Honoring Freedom Juneteenth Weekend Symposium. This weekend has an amazing lineup of speakers and musicians, including our own beloved Reverend D. Jacqueline Edwards. If you haven't received an email about this event, check out the Village News that's coming this week. And later in the week, it'll also be on the events page so you can register. So watch for this. It's coming up soon. We're also moving towards reopening soon. No date yet, and we need volunteers willing to be inside and help on a Sunday morning. Our contact for volunteers on particularly around this and all volunteering is Zoe DeMuro. Zoe, you're here tonight. Would you mind adding a couple of cents to this for me?
Sure. I don't want to take your time, folks, but it is absolutely critical that we have your volunteers to help us get the center open again. We talk about how we're a village and we talk about how it takes a village. Well, guess what? It takes people to make a village. We need you. So if you or anyone you know would be interested in helping out, we have many different things that we need volunteers for. The more people we get, the greater the likelihood that we will be able to open and have just a magnificent time. So please, please, please spread the word, get in touch with me. If you don't have my email address or my phone number, I will put it into the chat. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Also, Peter and Zoe are meeting after the service. They need to practice the Zoom breakout rooms. So if you're available and can stay on for a few minutes after the service, which is already running late, and I promise we're going to wrap real fast, it would be so helpful if we can get 8 or 9 folks that can stay on the call and help Peter and Zoe practice doing breakout rooms for about, what, 15 minutes or so, Pete, you guys? Maybe 20. Yeah, okay, that's it. Don't forget our in-person meetings, and Zoe also has a Thursday night meeting in Zoom. Susan meets in the courtyard on Tuesdays 3 to 4, and every day we meet at noon to discuss Dr. Dan's book, our Noontime Spiritual Journey, also known as the Guidance for a Spiritual Journey, and that's on the events page, all of this information. Everything's at the website, so check it out. I want to thank everybody for staying all this long with us, letting us go overtime. It's going to be a wonderful, wonderful month. Lots coming up. Check out the website. Doug, if you're willing and able, would you close us out in prayer?
Yes. of
Oh,
course.
I forgot the money part.
Uh-oh.
Offering. We can say all we want about everything we talk about, but the Oakland Center loves getting money, because Reverend E says, Reverend Ike said, we love money because money loves us. That's what she tells me to say all the time. So I love money. Almost forgot. Thank you, Peter, for reminding me. But sincerely, your donations and your gifts in the financial, physical, as Reverend Jerry says, time, treasure, and talent, they all add up to the one thing, making our beautiful center that you see behind me work. It keeps the lights on, keeps the folks employed, keeps the grounds clean, all those things. So if you can and you want to, I pass this digital bowl between us to receive your gift as I declare. And if you'll read with me, the gift I give is God in action. It does good work in the world and blesses creation. As all of you probably already know, everything is at the website, including a way you can donate with the button for credit card or texting, and finally, or mail in a check if you've so moved in that way. I am blessing your offering and receiving it gratefully, and appreciate everything that everyone does at this center. It rewards me in ways I could go on about all night, but I won't. I promise. Okay, with that in mind, Chaplain, Practitioner Doug, if you'd close us out in prayer, I'd appreciate it.
Okay. So just coming together again this evening, knowing full well that God expresses itself in all of its diversity, as its love, as its peace, as its heart, as its one life, that infinite knowingness, that infinite experience that God is, for it is all good. And that good is all God. And so I absolutely know that I am one with Spirit, and I know this to be the truth of each one of us here tonight, that we are all divine expressions of the diverse beauty that God is. And so I just give thanks for this evening. Thank you for coming together to celebrate this service, to open your consciousness to exploring the pain that we may experience, may be the stepping stone to the greater vision that is within each one of us, and to acknowledge and to celebrate all of those in the LGBTQ plus community, knowing that each one of them also is an expression of the beauty and the magnificence and the true colors that God is. For all of this and the more, I give great, great, great thanks. Thank you for being a part of this service. Many blessings to each one of you. And with that, I simply close by saying, and so it is.